Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Demai, Perek Chamishi, Halacha Ches. We're learning today Daf Mem Tes. We left off on Daf Mem Ches, Amid Beis, 5 lines before the bottom of the Amid, or really in the second wide line, Amar Rabbi Lazar, but Rabbi Yossi in the beginning of the line. We have just quoted the machlokes between Rabbi Meir on one side and Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon on the other side. Rabbi Meir holds, as we quoted so many times in this Masechta, that ein kinyan l'goy be'eretz Yisrael lahafkia miyad ma'aser. If a goy owns land in the Holy Land, the ownership does not remove the land's kedusha, and subsequently everything that grows is obligated to be tithed. Obviously, the goy won't do any of the tithing. He's not commanded to do that. But if a yid buys that produce from a goy, then the Jew is obligated, according to Rav Meir, on a biblical level, to separate all of the trumas umaises. That's called ein kinyan l'goy. On the other hand, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon omrim that yesh kinyan, etc. Now, but however, just for the record, unlike one amoira that we'll learn noch today, everyone else understands b'shitas Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon that midrabanan, even though yesh kinyan la'akum or yesh kinyan l'goy beretz Yisrael, rabbinically you have to tithe. Now we began on Daf Mem Ches Amud Beis with the sources of Rabbi Meir. We concluded yesterday by learning one source. We're going to continue today by attempting to have a second source. What we will ultimately do in the beginning of Daf Mem Tes, we're going to learn a Pnei Moshe that puts a very important qualification in the opinion of Rabbi Meir, right? Ein kinyan l'goy beretz Yisrael. So therefore, when you buy produce from a goy, you chayiv to tithe it biblically. True, but let me just say one thing: if the goy's ownership not only is in the land, but he harvested, and the key is he did the meiruach. In other words, if the product, if the produce, whether grains, legumes, fruits, vegetables, whatever, if it was under the ownership of a goy, all the way through the Gemara Malacha, even according to Rabbi Meir, that product will be exempt from it being tithed. I know that we said it a while back, but that's something that we have to clearly remind ourselves of, and that will be the beginning of Daf Mem Tes, which is extremely important. We're going to have some halachic rulings, halacha l'maisa, and as we will see, that we paskin like Rab Shimon, we're going to have in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi the following: that according to Rab Shimon, as we mentioned, other than one shita, everyone else understands b'shitas Rabbi Yehuda ben Rab Shimon that rabbinically you're chayiv to tithe it. So let's go like this. So he says like this: that if a yid buys detached produce from a goy before the miruach, but he bought it already detached, even though yes, Rab Shimon will hold that rabbinically it has to be tithed. However, you have to tithe it, but you don't give it to a kohen, chevra. You have to separate the truma. You have to separate the trumas ma'aser, and you charge the kohen for its value. We already mentioned so many times that truma has a lesser value than chulin because less people can eat it, right? Less demand, less demand, the lesser the price. But nevertheless, you don't have to gift it. Even rabbinically, you can charge. Masha Inkin, according to Rab Shimon, if a Jew bought the produce while it's still attached to the land, even though it grew in a land that belongs to a goy, and again with Rab Shimon, yesh kinyan, biblically it's exempt, rabbinically it's chayiv, but since the Jew bought it while it's still attached, it's not only that he's chayiv to separate, but he has to gift it, and he may not charge. That will be the big statement of that is said in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. The Gemara is going to give some backings to that. It's also going to become clear in today's daf that Kohanim and Leviim, if they own land, they're chayiv to separate all of the trumas u'maisres, but anything that one would have to give to a kohen, they get to keep because he's a kohen. Or the ma'aser that's separated by the Levi, who he has to separate it, he then gets to keep it because he's a Levi. You will actually learn that even a kohen can keep the ma'aser. because my sedition, which has to be given to a Levi, the Levi does not exclude the Kohanim that are also Bnei Levi. And then we're going to learn the Shita of Rabbi Hoshaya, who holds that B'Shitas Rab Shimon, Yesh Kinyan, even Midrabanan, you don't even have to do any type. This is extremely lenient in the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon. We're going to have an interesting machlokes today between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. In Bavli, Eruv and Daf Menvav Amid Beis, we have the Klole Halacha. Do you remember? And then, when you have two people that are arguing, like Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Meir, Halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda. And all of the different kolam of who we paskin like. In the Bavli over there, the Gemara wanted to know if it's a machlekes between Rab Meir and Rab Shimon, Mai, and the Gemara says Teiku. Here in the Yerushalmi, it's a given that machlekes Rab Meir and Rab Shimon, for sure, halach will be like Rab Shimon. And Chedra, let's go now to the inside of Memches Amid Beis. Again, we are either, you can call it the second wide line, which is 5 lines before the bottom of the Amid. We just gave one source when the Torah juxtaposes karkois to avadim, just like a goy cannot fully own an avidivity, his ownership in the land is also not, as we worded it, he doesn't own the land itself, he only owns the land lipei roisav. Now the Gemara says, in front of Rabbi Yasa, I will attempt to give you another source, l'shitas Rab Meir. The following is also Messiah Rabbi Meir. And he's also quoting a pasuk in Bahar. And the pasuk says, that the land may not be sold forever. Kili ha'aretz. Now, the word litzmisus means lechultanis, you may never sell it permanently. In other words, what does it mean you cannot sell it permanently? The way he understands it, that if you make a permanent sale, which would mean selling it to a guy who's not bound by the law of Yovel, who won't give it back in Yovel, the sale lechatchila is invalid. So that's another source that you can't really sell the land itself. In other words, when you sell the land to a Yid, the fact that it goes back to you and Yovel is understood. It goes back to the owner because he never really bought the land. It always belongs to the original owner, which are all Yidden that got their portion under the leadership of Yeshua. So he teaches this Rabbi Lazar that loisi macher means not you shouldn't, but you cannot. It won't be effective because a guy can never fully own the land. Amalei that no. Rabbi Yasser told Rabbi Lazar that not only does it not give a proof, will this not be a source let Rabbi Meir? It's actually opposite. It's a source let Rab Shimon. That kol garma amra, the he Messiah let Rab Shimon, that which you brought actually is a raya to Rab Shimon. Why? Because the base of Rabbi Lazar's proof is because he interpreted, he taught, he translated the words loisi macher as it cannot be sold. Actually, Rabbi Yasser is saying that the words loisi macher means don't do it. Because if you'll do it, it will be effective. And effective means that the guy is really going to own it. A guy is not bound by the laws of Yovel. The guy will never give it back to the original family that inherited it by Chuzah from the Eivishter under the leadership of Yeshua. The fact that if a guy buys it, he actually will own it is a raya that he does have ownership in the land itself. And that's why the Torah tells you, you may not sell it to him. In other words, but if you did sell it to him, then yes, it will remain permanently in the hand of a guy, which is a raya that the guy does own the land itself that he buys. Look inside the Rashirilio, towards the end of the left column, third to last line. God says, don't do it. Because if you will sell it to him, but la kedusha, you will actually downgrade its kedusha, and therefore, yesh kinyan legoy be'eretz Yisrael, and it's such a type of kinyan that it removes the kedusha eretz Yisrael, and now it's mafkia biblically the obligation of giving off trumas umaises. So now, not only did we not have a second source to Rab Meir, actually, if you teach loy as you may not that you cannot, but you may not, it's a raya to Rab Shimon. And now let's see, who do we paskin like? and that will be consistent in the whole daf today. Many different Amiroyim will all paskin like Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. So Rab Chuna Ruba, the great Rab Chuna, that lived in the city of Tzipoidin Amar, that Hinik Rabbi Chanina b'Tzipoidin, that Rab Chanina paskined in the city Kahada de Rabbi Shimon, that one that Yesh King Legoy be'Eretz Yisrael umafkia midei meiser. Rab Zeira Amar, another statement, another report of the same, that Hinig Rabbi Chanina b'Tzipoidin, they're both testifying regarding the same Rabbi Chanina, Kahadod Rabbi Shimon, again, like we mentioned, the Yesh King in Legoy Be'eretz Yisrael, and therefore Umafkia Midei Meiser. And now we are turning to Daf Mentes. Now, as we mentioned in our words of introduction, okay, let's go back to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, who holds that ain't King in Legoy, and therefore when you buy produce, even though it grew in the land owned by a goy, you're chayiv midoy raisa to tithe it. We have to limit that. So says Rab Zeira Amar, Kumi Rabbi Abo, in the name of Rabbi Lazar, that Afal Gav, that Rav Meir Amar, Ein Kinyan Legoy Be'eretz Yisrael L'Potrim and Hamaisres. Nevertheless, Moido Hu Hacha, he'll agree in this case, as we'll speak out. What is this case? Yesh L'Kinyan Chasim, that the goy does have ownership in the land. Ownership meaning Amar Rabbi Ba Oichelas Pedes, he fully owns the produce of the land. So, just as an example, just like we said before, Rav Meir, right? That juxtaposition, that ayah that we had yesterday, the ayah that was not refuted, that ownership of land is like the ownership in an eved. Yeah, he doesn't own the eved himself, but he does. If he buys an eved, he has the rights to the masiyadav of the eved. It's all his. The peiros fully belong to the goy, and that's important, as we'll speak out on the Pnei Moshe that we said in the introduction, because since he really is a chelos peiros, therefore, if he owned the peiros not only when they came out of the ground, but all the way through the meruach, he only sold it after the gemar malacha. Then even midrabanan, not only not midoraisa, not midrabanan, you b'chal won't have to tithe it. Look inside the Pnei Moshe, the top Pnei Moshe. That what does he own? He actually owns the achilas peiros. Means she'im ha-peiros nigmaru biyad hanachri. That if the gemar malacha was all the way while it still belonged to the goy, v'chein Yisrael shemachar karka lenachri lachilas peiros yesh loy bohen kinyan, which means that she'im nigmaru malachton lemasrois biyadoi. If it reached the phase of gemar malacha while it still belonged to the guy, which would be, let's say, the meruach, so then patunim and amaises, even according to Rav Meir, because the liyamar Rav Meir ain't king and elalein karka. That the land the be kidushasa kaima, and therefore the im Yisrael chazar v'lak chamimenu, if a yid repurchases the land, or if the yid, the original owner, another yid, if he didn't buy back the land, he only bought the peiros, but he bought it in an earlier stage, not by gemar malacha, prior to gemar malacha. The new Jewish owner brought it to gemar malacha. The nigmaru b'yad Yisrael. Then l'shita Rav Meir, since ein king and legoy chayavin the meiser is biblically. Yes.
Sorry. Why does the Gemar Malacha make such a big difference?
Because that was the whole thing we also had in the previous Masech and Peah. In other words, there are certain points that when the obligation is triggered, right, which would be here by Gemar Malacha, if the owner is not a bar mitzvah, so then it will never go back into effect.
Okay. I remember
that. You know, the chiyuv of Peah is to leave it when you're harvesting. If a goy harvested the field.
Right. Yeah. I'd forgotten. Thank you.
Yeah. That's why it's good to chazer. But if it was finalized, it became a ready product, which would mean in many cases that v'nismarchu, that you smooth the pile, biyato akum, l'kula alma yesh kinyan bohen, the akum owns the product, not the land. Then he the karka lekani, peiros miyakani. So that's a great review. Again, I know we spoke it out a while back. So here we have a huge qualification b'shitas Rab Meir. Now, Let's go. This will be now a kasha on the opinion of Rabbi Meir that ain't king in la'akum. How can there be such an opinion for Hataninan, but did we not learn in the Mishnah? And we are quoting here a Mishnah in Gittin, in Bavli, it's Gittin Daf, Mem Zayin. And there we're speaking about the Gemara in Yerushalmi Bechlal doesn't quote all of it. So we're going to continue to read the case of the Gemara in the Pnei Moshe. We began with the Pnei Moshe. We are more or less in the middle of the line into the Pnei Moshe. It's probably 13, 14 lines from the top. That the Mishnah says, Halikeach, maybe bikurin mipnei tikkun oilam. What is the Mishnah talking about? So guys, keep your finger in the Gemara and look inside the Pnei Moshe. Ataninon hasam kamahadir the kasha is going to be based on the premise that the Mishnah that we are quoting also follows Rabbi Meir. Our Mishnah is Rav Meir, right? We just learned that Rav Meir holds ein kinyan. And what does it say over there? If a Yid sold his field to a goy, and then Yisrael, a Jew bought it back, it doesn't make a difference whether it's the original owner or someone else. And during that time, all right, there was already fruit on the trees while it belonged to the goy. And the Jew buying it back, says the Mishnah, the current Jewish owner has to bring bikurim, but the Mishnah makes it clear he's not bringing bikurim because he's biblically obligated. He's only bringing bikurim b'pnei tikkun ha'olam. B'pnei tikkun ha'olam. What's the tikkun ha'olam? That sheyedu she'ein l'nochri king and gamur. By them bringing bikurim, they'll know that the guy never really owned it, and therefore v'yishtadlu b'pidyoina miyodei kadei she'teshavik b'shas. In other words, tikkun ha'olam means that we want for the land in Eretz Yisrael to be owned by Jews. And if a Yid who would buy land that had fruit on it while it belonged to a goy would be told, you don't bring bikurim, what would he understand? He'll understand that there's no kedusha there. And if there's no kedusha there, he won't be motivated to buy it. So that's the tikkun ha'olam, to tell the lekeach, bring bikurim. What does that all imply? That all implies that on a biblical level, he's not obligated. So now let's go back in our Gemara. Frag the Gemara, hold on. According to what we are learning right now, which is Shitas Rav Meir, v'yavi bikurim devar Torah, asks the Gemara. Look inside the first wide line in the Pnei Moshe under the Gemara. V'yavi bikurim midvar Torah. Hol Rav Meir, the ein king l'nachri, im kein midvar Torah, chayiv Yisrael alekech b'meno l'havi bikurim. And the Gemara does not answer anything. Now, why does the Gemara not answer anything? So, that's again, we are becoming more familiar that especially in the Yerushalmi, a non-answer many times means that the answer is so obvious that there's no even need to answer it. And what would that be, says the Marafulda, that the Mishnah must be Rav Shimon. I know that normally Stam Mishnah Rav Meir, we know that, but this is so clear when you say that halakech maybe bikurim mepnei tikkun ha'olam. Clearly, that Mishnah in Gittin is following the Shita that yesh kinyan la'akum, and nevertheless, when pnei tikkun ha'olam, you maybe bikurim. Okay, go on. Now, says the Gemara, we are learning l'shitas Rab Shimon. A guy owns land, produce that grows from the land will never be obligated biblically to be tithed. Do you have to tithe it rabbinically? So basically what we're going to have from now until the end of the daf is we're going to have a machloikes amoyroim b'shitas Rab Shimon. And I'm saying machloikes amoyroim, really only one opinion Rab Hoshaya will hold, that according to Rab Shimon, like whom we paskin, is so lenient that even rabbinically there doesn't have to be tithing, but everyone else holds that even though yesh kinyan la'akum, you have to tithe it rabbinically. What we never spoke out is, what does it mean you have to tithe it rabbinically? Does it mean everything? Does it mean perhaps only truma, as we'll see? And furthermore, the ikid is that when you tithe something rabbinically, are you chayiv to gift it to the kohen, or can you charge the kohen? Because as we'll see, there is such a thing. Sometimes you have to do it rabbinically. You got to go all the way. You're chayiv midrabanan to do whatever you would have done devar Torah. And as we'll see over here, it's not so simple. So Rabbi Yoina, who is quoting in the name of Rab Simon, the Shem Rabbi Shua ben Levi, and here we go. If a Jew buys produce that grew in a land owned by a goy, but it was already detached by the goy, in other words, it only changed its ownerships after it is detached. Let Rav Meir, you're chayiv midoiraisa before the Meruach. Obviously, you're speaking with Rav Shimon. Mafresh truma utrumas meiser mehalacha. The word halacha means over here midrabanan. So the first chiddush she's saying is, yeah, there is a chiyuv midrabanan, only trumas meiser, not meiser edition, not meiser ani, not meiser sheni, only truma. Now, obviously, in order to separate trumas meiser, you have to separate meiser edition, like we learned the whole time by the mai. From it, separate 10% of the meiser edition, but that is a midrabanan. So now you have truma gedoyla and meiser edition, and v'noisnam la shevet, you have to give it to the tribe, meaning you have to give it to the kohen. But v'noitel damim min shevet, even though you have to give it, you charge for its value. Truma is less valuable than chulin, but it has some value. Wow. So there is some limited rabbinic obligation, and even that you can charge money for. That is only because the Jew bought the produce when it was already detached. But if you buy it while it's still attached, and all it Rab Shimon, it's attached to the land that belongs to a goy. Rab Shimon holds that the goy's ownership exempts it biblically from tithing. Here, again, you have to tithe it rabbinically. But here there's actually a higher level of obligation. Mafresh truma utrumas meiser mehalacha. You have to tithe it, and again, not everything, only truma. Trumas meiser mehalacha means midrabanan, but over here v'noistam la shevet. Here you have to give it to the kohanim. Ve'eino notel damim min hashevet. Wowie. Here we go. Look inside the maraful, the daf mem tes, the 7 lines before the bottom of the Amar and Amad Aleph, that loy. Since you bought it while it's still attached. Now, guys, when produce is attached, even if you made a separation of trumas u'maisris, it's ineffective. You cannot do it. From when could you do it? Not from when you're obligated. Well, first of all, the produce has to reach oinas hamaisris. Let's make a general correct statement. Generally, that's if the produce reached a 3rd level of its growth. If you then detached it, even though you didn't yet bring it to the Meiruach, and you're not chayiv to tithe it, if one separated trumas u'maisris, what they did is effective. You know, there's different levels. You have, it didn't even reach a 3rd. It's garnishment nish. It reached a 3rd attached. You cannot separate trumas u'maisris. Because when it's detached, from here until the Meiruach, you're not chayiv, but you could. From the Meiruach, you're chayiv. So the rule is that if you bought it from the guy while it was still mechubar, since you cannot, there is no chiyuv, you can't even separate it if you did it. It's ineffective. Elo b'yad Yisrael, v'after yesh l'goy min ha'Torah kingdom ha'aretz, even though we're following Shittas Rab Shimon, and therefore v'ha'peiris nitru b'yad goy, simply because it's growing in the land of a goy, nevertheless, ho'il mechubarim kanam mimenu, since the Jew bought it while they are still attached. So rabbinically, mishavin alohu kepeiris adoisef. They make it as if it's his, and therefore there is a higher level rabbinically to separate. But what's the higher level? Not to separate all the trumas u'maisris. Aleph, only to separate truma and trumas meiser. But here you have to gift it to the kohen. You cannot charge. Masha enkin. This is all b'shem Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Masha enkin. Let Rab Shimon. When you buy detached produce that grew in the land of a goy, obviously before the Meiruach, even though Lit Rab Shimon you are exempt, Midrabanan, there is a very low level of obligation, low meaning only trumas meiser, and here's the ikir, that v'noitel damim min hashevet, you get to charge money. So now we are clearly learning in the Gemara a concept when sometimes, not always, sometimes when you have to separate meisres, here it's actually only truma. Midrabanan, or meiser min ha-meiser, midrabanan, you have to separate it. You cannot eat it. Only a kohen can eat it. But you get the charge from the kohen. Now the Gemara says, my tam doesn't go on the second case of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. It does not go on when you buy it mechubarim. Actually, that makes sense. You having to separate and gift it is the norm. Where does Rabbi Shua ben Levi get this idea that there is this case of buying it detached, that even though you have to separate it and give it, but giving it means you sell it, not you gift it. You can be noitel domim. Where does he get that from? And we're turning to the Mem Tes Amud Beis. Now, where it gets a little bit tricky is because if you're going to just count the next 6 lines in the Gemara, the first 3, top 3 and the second 3, the actual tam is coming from lines 4, 5, 6, from the second group of 3 lines, clearly Lakula Alma, to the point, as you can look inside the Pnei Moshe, you can see inside the Marafulda, that they flip the version of how the Gemara is laid out. Because the top 3 lines, as we have it, even though there is a limud that's coming from the same source for the source that we are looking for, but it's a whole different limud. We're going to keep the girsa. Just be aware that the Gemara asks my tam, and the answer on Daf Mem Tes Amud Beis, the way we have it, doesn't right away go to the tam, but it goes to a source that will be used for the tam. So let's read it the way we have it in our version. So when it says in Parshas Koirach, Ki sikhu me'eis b'nei Yisrael. Now I want you to know that pasuk is speaking not about Truma, that pasuk is speaking about Ma'aser Rishon. Now the emphasis is, Vlad, that we take it me'eis b'nei Yisrael. So there is one limud not related, but learned from the words me'eis b'nei Yisrael, that me'eis b'nei Yisrael at moitzi, that Ma'aser Rishon is taken from a Yisrael, the ein at moitzi miyad kuhuna v'leviyah, but you don't get it from the hands of a Kohen and a Levi. So let me say what was known prior to this limud and what this limud is being mechadesh biblically. You know, when it says that God did not give the Levi a portion in the land, that's true. They did not get a chelik like the other tribes got it, but make no mistake that Leviim and Kohanim, they were halachically able to, and they de facto owned land. And it could be that you can have a Kohen and a Levi that owns even more land than a Yisrael. So just to make that clear, they could own land. What happens when they own land and they grow produce? Are they chayiv to tithe it? Absolutely, just the way a Yisrael does. But I'm a Yisrael, so when I have land, if I'll have land in Eretz Yisrael, I'll grow produce. So after I separate, I have to give the truma to the Kohen. I have to give the Ma'aser Rishon to a Levi. I have to give the Ma'aser Ani to an Ani. If the Kohen is the owner, he separates Truma, he keeps it. The Levi has to give away the Truma, but the Levi gets to separate Ma'aser Rishon and keep it. The question is, can a Kohen keep the Ma'aser Rishon? That is what we need the limud from. Now, and so first of all, without a pasuk, you're right, we said a Kohen is a Levi, but this limud, the fact that when the Torah speaks about Ma'aser Rishon, when you get the Ma'aser Rishon, when you get it me'eis Yisrael, b'nei Yisrael, implies that a Levi will only get it from an Israelite. Not only will a Levi not get it from another Levi, because that Levi will keep it, he won't even get it from a Kohen. There was a Kohen, that's the limit. Kisikhu me'eis b'nei Yisrael at moitzi. You, the Levi, can get Ma'aser Rishon from an Israelite. That means from anyone that comes from any tribe, except the Levi, except Levi and Kohen. I know it's the same, but that the word is that even a Kohen gets to keep the Ma'aser Rishon. Now that limud has nothing to do with what we're learning about. But now we're going to use the same pasuk for us, Yokai Demar Rabbi Lazar, that limud resembles now the answer that Rabbi Lazar expounded this same pasuk in Koirach when it says Kisikhu me'eis b'nei Yisrael. So he also learned something, but he learned something to get to us that me'eis b'nei Yisrael at moitzi ve'ein at moitzi miyad hagoy, which means that if you have produce that grew in the hands of a goy, which is exactly the case of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, ve'ein at moitzi miyad goy, what does that mean? In atomoitzi, you'll have to pay for it. That is the source that he uses, that there are times that when now, obviously, God does not write a verse to tell you how to behave with rabbinic laws, because this is written before the rabbinic law. This is called an asmachta. So we have an asmachta from the pasuk that whenever there is no biblical obligation to give the truma, when it's only midrabanan, there are times that even though you get it, you have to buy it. You don't get it. You get it b'chinam when it's biblical. Even sometimes midrabanan, but not always midrabanan. Look inside the Pnei Moshe. Today's a Pnei Moshe Day. 4 lines from the top. The ein atomoitzi v'dei akum kolemed sharei apeiros ha'elu bo'u mitachas yad ha'akum umimenu lo yochel litlum klum. If the guy would have owned it throughout, he would have gotten nothing. Va'achshav the hilkach achshav she'em b'yad Yisrael. So the kohen utzarech lite. Yeah, the yid has to give it to the kohen. But v'tzarech ha'kohen lite not damim, but geld dafer geld. The money he has to give. Bishvil trumas meiser. And that is a statement over here. Okay. No, but Allah Amar, I'm just saying because the Pnei Moshe now has the first 3 lines, if we're reading inside the Pnei Moshe. And on that we say that this is like the other limud. Okay. So Ebekitzer, we have 2 limudim, and coming back over here, that's his source. Now, what's the Bechein from B'Shem Rabbi Shua ben Levi? Yeah, charge, not charge. That even according to Rabbi Shimon, you have to tithe. Not everything, but truma. However, says the Gemara, Amar Abacha, I want you to know that we made Rab Hoshayam. Bikshu lihimanes al Haramelech. Haramelech was an area that most produce that was grown there was not grown in land that then, in that times of Rab Hoshayam, belonged to Yidden. It was an area that was under the control of Goyim. And what they wanted to paskin, lihimonos, to make account, is whenever the Sanhedrin is enacting a takana, whenever you are making a new rabbinic rule, normally the way it has to be done is you have to convene the Sanhedrin, and you have to take a vote, and the majority opinion will stand. So they wanted to gather the Sanhedrin regarding Al Haramelech, regarding our topic, that produce that came from the region called Haramelech. That means it was grown by Goyim, and it was bought by Yidden. And what are we learning until now? That midrabanan epis, you have to separate, get charged, not charged. What he wanted was Amru. I'm sorry. What they wanted was lepatre min ha'maisros. He wanted to completely exempt it from the maisros. Look inside the Rashi Ilio. Keep your finger in the Gemara. The right column, 6 lines from the bottom. Lihimanes al Haramelech. He wanted lekabetz chachamim. He wanted to gather the chachamim. La'amoid leminyan. They should make a vote regarding al Haramelech, meaning if the majority of the people would exempt it, then he wanted to remove the rabbinic obligation. He completely wanted to remove the rabbinic obligation. Lav mishum deloy kavshu oili bavel. First of all, to make it clear, Haramelech is not out of the Holy Land. No, because we clearly learned that even the oili bavel, which is what really counts, is the mashma de kavshu, right? Elo hatam the lekam veregamekabel the mashma that since the loy hoy yisrael mitzuyim sham, Yidden didn't live there at the time of Rabbi Yishaya. Either they rented their fields to Goyim, or machrum lahem. And b'shem achar kach yoashu oison lohen. We're speaking about a case where Jews rented their lands and they were miyayish to get it back, or they sold the lands. Bottom line is that that area was under Goyish control, and they wanted to even rabbinically completely exempt maisros. And Amru Yavei Rabbi Hoshaya. So when they convened, they were waiting for Rabbi Hoshaya to join, for them to paskin what they all would have paskin. That happened to be that that opportunity was lost. The opportunity was lost either because he passed away, the Marafullah writes. Bottom line is that they never ended up giving that psak. But we see what is Shitas Rabbi Hoshaya. And indeed, says the Gemara, that Rabbi Yudah bar Pazi, B'Shem Rabbi Hoshaya, Don't forget, for Rabbi Shaya to hold that there should not be a rabbinic, he held there is no rabbinic. He wanted to remove the rabbanan. That's all because you follow Rab Shimon. If you would hold like Rav Meir, then you would not be so lenient. If I cared, Rav Meir holds ein king in la'akum. Rav Meir would hold that there's a chiv midoid aisa. So indeed, we have b'shem Rabbi Shaya that he paskin halacha ke Rab Shimon that yesh kinyan. Frag the Gemara, why did we even need Rabbi Shaya to say that? And here's where we have a very important machlokes Bavli Yerushalmi, as we quoted in our introduction, that in Bavli Erev and Dafman Vavam and Beis, the Gemara gives you the klale halacha. When it comes to the Gemara goes through so many machlokes Tanoim and Amoraim between certain Tanoim, specific Tanoim and Amoraim. There are rules who we pass on like. I know there are exceptions, but there are many rules. Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda, right? Rabbi Yosi, halacha ke Rabbi Yosi, nimukay imoy, if you remember. And the Gemara in the Bavli asks, what happens if it's Rav Meir and Rav Shimon? It was Rav Meir and Shimon, my teku. That's in Bavli. In Yerushalmi, it's a given that machlokes Rav Meir and Rav Shimon, halacha ke Rav Shimon. So based on the given in the Yerushalmi, asks the Gemara, why did I need to have Rabbi Yehuda Bar Pasi in the name of Rabbi Hoshaya? To tell you, halacha ke Rab Shimon, this is a machlokes Rab Meir and Rab Shimon. Actually, it's even worse because together with Rab Shimon is Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Meir, halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda, even in the Bavli. The loy chein man nan amrin. If you wouldn't have told me halacha ke Rab Shimon, what would we have said? We would have known it automatically. Rab Meir and Rab Shimon ain't halacha ke Rab Shimon. So why do I need you to make that statement? Right, the Gemara pulled up 10 lines from the bottom. The Gemara is asking, if they wouldn't have made that statement, what do you think we would say? Answers the Gemara that Rav Meir has another Tana with him, Rabbi Tarfin. And I know that Rav Shimon also has Rabbi Yehuda. But at the moment, Rav Meir and Rav Shimon, Allah ke Rav Shimon. Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, Allah ke Rabbi Yehuda. But if it's Rav Meir and another Tana, everything is a question, and therefore we itaka halacha ke Rav Shimon. But we need someone to tell us that. Ella begin the Tani. Since we have a brayse, in the brayse we learned Amar Rav Shimon Shazuri, Ma'aseh Shenesor who paid us tefillin, they paid oisai. This is something that we just learned, right? Yesterday or 2 days ago. That if a person already was misaken their tevel, so they have chulin. If some other of their tevel got mixed with their chulin, right? These are the basic rules. That if roiv chulin, biblically it's batal, rabbinically it's not batal because it's a davar sheyesh lamatirin. If the roiv is tevel, then even biblically, the fact that there's chulin in there, the tevel is a problem biblically. And we learned what the issue. The issue is that what am I going to do now? Since we say ein bila, in other words, you can't say, well, I know the percentages. I know that it's 6 pounds tevel and 4 pounds chulin, and let me just really, really mix it up together. Let me remove 2%, but the 2%, 60% of it will be tevel for the tevel, truma for the tevel, and the other chulin for the chulin. We don't say. We say that the mixture won't be that even. You might end up removing from what the 2%, you're going to remove in the 2% is going to be more than 40% chulin. There's going to be 50% chulin. That means you are going to attempt to be misakin, tevel, by giving chulin as truma. It doesn't work that way. You can't be toidem min aptur ala chiyuv. So the only solution is you, the owner, you have to buy tevel. And now you know how much quantity of tevel is in the mixture. And mimakam acher, from tevel gomur, you'll separate the trumas umaisis, right? And that will be actually a het that we learned that normally a Jew cannot sell tevel. But if the buyer says to the seller, sell me your tevel, I need tevel because I have a mixture, then you could. Here, the story in the Brayse of Shem Shazuri was there was another solution. A Jew cannot sell tevel. Buy it from a goy. Buy it from a goy. Once I got such a mixture, roiv tevel, and I asked Rab Tarfon what to do. And Amali, Rab Tarfon was practical. There were goyim who owned produce in that region, and they had tevel that did not even come to the Meiruach. And he said, "Say v'loichem miyat min hagoy and ba'aser alei." Now, very simple. According to Rab Shimon, that's not a solution, because according to Rab Shimon, tevel that you buy from a goy even before the meruach is biblically exempted from trumas u'maisvus. And even though we just learned, let's go according to the Shem Rabbi Shimon Levi, it's chayiv, not fully, and only chayiv midrabanan. That's called you're being toidim and up to alachiyuv. This solution, not that what we had in our Mishnah, go buy tevel from a Jew. Buying it from a goy is only because Rabbi Tarfon holds like Rav Meir that taka ein kinyan la'akum. And when you buy tevel before the miruach from a goy, that is tevel midoraisa. So you can use that tevel to be toidim a mafresh on the mixture. So clearly we see that Rab Tarfon holds ein kinyan and v'tani alei. And fakert, after Rab Shimon Shazuri quoted the story, so now it's clear that Rab Tarfon holds ein kinyan. Then he quotes that not everyone agrees with him. We already know who argues, Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon. The Tani Yalei that Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon oimrim, unlike Rab Tarfon, yesh kinyan l'goy be'eretz Yisrael l'patre ben ha'maiser. So now, what is the Gemara answering? We are showing you that Rav Meir is not a stand-alone opinion. That Rav Meir and Rabbi Tarfon both hold ein kinyan. So now it becomes 2 against 2. So without Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi, b'shem Rabbi Hoshaya saying Allah Rab Shimon, Doloitizbar Meimar, you might have thought to say, for you not to think to say that Trei Kol Kovel Trein Inun, it's 2 against 2, and therefore you rightfully would have said, following the general klolei halacha, you can't say we paskin like Rab Shimon. It's not Rab Shimon and Rav Meir. It's Rab Shimon against Rav Meir and Rab Tarfon. And yeah, Rab Shimon has Rabbi Yehuda with him, but still it's Rav Meir and Rab Tarfon. So Lefum King, Sorech Loima, that's why we needed Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi to say, Gavaldik, that halachic Rab Shimon. Guys, we'll stop over here.